So I hope you can see my screen now. Today I want to talk about vision for identity management in higher education as I see it and as Evolveum see it. But before I start, I will start briefly about me. So for those who doesn't know me, I have actually two affiliations. One is with Evolveum, which is a company behind open source identity and access management midPoint. And the second one is Masaryk University in the Czech Republic. And I'm lucky enough that I'm doing the same thing for both. And this is authentication, authorization infrastructure, and identity management. And I'm doing it for more than 10 years now. And I have experience with designing, building, and even operations with authentication, authorization infrastructure, and not just the local one or university, for example, but also some international one for research project. And what I'm doing there, except of course the designing and operating the whole stuff, is to communicate with users and try to understand what they need and then design, actually deploy and operate the new features based on these requirements. And even though Evolveum is a normal company, that even there I'm focused on higher education and on research environment. So to get to this vision of identity management, let's start with some evolution, what was and when we are now. So first we had something which I like to call like generation 0 of identity management, which was just a bunch of scripts and cron jobs to at least slightly automate it. So for those who remember this area, you probably know how to code in Perl because that was the main language used. And at the end, we have something like combination of manual and automatic steps, which made the work done. Just provide the users where they need to be and create the accounts where the accounts needs to be. And then we move to first generation, which was first real identity management and identity and access management systems, which help us to automate provisioning and deprovisioning and capture all the rules we have and we need to solve for the identity management. And the goal of this first generation was automation, just to make our life easier so don't we have to do manual steps, for example, when the new employee is coming. And then we are moving to the second generation of IdM, where we have this baseline of identity management somehow figured out, and we are thinking out what to do next. And the next steps are, of course, some accessory delegation. So just bring non-IT people and give them some power to manage roles or groups, and also provide some self-service for a user, for example, to manage user profile. We want to move to the identity governance to deal with policies, certification, and of course with some auditing and reporting to integrate the IdM process with other processes on universities, for example. On the technical level, we are moving from the basic groups, roles, and users to some life cycles, so we can implement some grace periods or work with employees or students before they become officially affiliated with the institution. And of course, we have some external inputs as well, and in this case is how to deal with personal data, how to deploy some privacy preserving features. So all of these I consider a second generation of the identity management. But to be honest, it's really hard to draw a line there. It's really hard to know where the second generation begins and ends because it's still evolving. So it's still a bit fuzzy and we have to wait a bit before this will be set in stone. But the important thing is, where are we now? And usually for most of us, we are somewhere between first and second generation. So, and it's because the second generation is quite wide. So everyone is just picking things up from there based on their priorities and what they need to solve in the moment. But even with this, we still have some weak points and some stuff, some problems and things that we need to improve. And one of them is, for example, provisioning and deprovisioning, which is still not entirely solved and might be problematic for some systems. and it's mostly because there are no widely applicable standards for it. Self-service and delegation of rights to users, to non-IT professionals, it's still complicated. It's there, it's possible, but it's not that easy to use for users. We have problems with guest and visitor accounts. And of course, we need to move to the place we can scale our IDM systems, because the IDM is growing and more systems are depending on it. So we need to scale it. We need to figure out how our infrastructure and operation procedures. But I was talking, and I will be talking today mostly about identity management, but it's good to put it in the broader scope as well. Because on a broader scope, we need to learn how to collaborate with others, with other organizations. And we have some tools for it, like identity federations. But it's not just about the tools, but it's about figuring how to do it on a technical level, how to have processes, how to make it usable for users. And we have to do account linking for sure, because with identity federation, there are more accounts to come and more accounts to deal with. We have to strengthen our self-service, because if we are in the distributed environment of federations, the self-service is really crucial. And eventually, we will get to the point where you have your nice IDM, and then you have some federated institutions that you are collaborating with, and you will have to strengthen this collaboration on identity level and probably figure out how to provision data and users between different IDMs, like your own and some external ones. And of course, standardization is something that we should pursue, because we don't have many standards, and some of them are good, like the SAML and OpenID Connect, but for provisioning, it's still a mess. So any standardization would help us. But now I will get back to the identity management itself, which I want to talk about today, and introduce the vision for the future as I see it. And main thing is the identity management is not only about managing your identities and relations and access controls, but actually it's a very powerful data source in your organizations, because you have all your users, their attributes, roles, your services, accesses, everything. And now it's about how you can use this data for other things, how you can support other systems that you have, your other use cases. And I will give you some example how you can think about it. And one of them is service catalog. Let's say I want to build a catalog for users, then users can come and see what services are available for them, like immediately, or they can ask for them. And this you can easily build with data in your identity management system, where you should have all your services and different type of accesses there, or already you have all your users, you know who can access what and in what conditions are needed for this. And using all the data, you can easily build your service catalog, for example. Second example is some privacy enhancement features. So again, identity management, you have all the data there, or you'll have all your users, you have all the attributes. So you can just mark which attributes are sensitive, and you immediately know what data you have. And if you have provisioning and deprovisioning everywhere, you have control about the flow of this private data. So you can know where the data are for each user very easily. And let's say you want to implement some consent service on top of it. And it's really easy, because you can capture the consent there, store it in attributes, and use it for provisioning. And if a user decides to take the consent back, you will just deprovision the private data, and everything it work as expected, as a loss slowly as forcing to do. So this is just an example how you can use identity management as data source to support other services and use cases. So the future is in tighter organization of identity management and rest of the organization, rest of the services. And of course, you will have to increase the cross-organization collaboration as well, and hopefully identity management will play a key role in that. And the last part is identity governance, because with identity management growing and having more and more users there, more roles and rules, and even delegating some responsibilities within the identity management to other people, is hard to keep it consistent, to keep it somehow structured. And you can have policies that help you with that and either strictly deny some actions or just have the policies and have some campaign to check if your IdM setting is still compliant with the policy. And if not, you can take some action. For example, you have some organization unit and you can say the policy is that all organization units have to have some manager who's managing it. And if it's not there, the policy can catch this, and based on it, you can take an action. So policy-driven IdM is probably, again, one way to think about IdM in the future. Just to get back now, the question is, how do we get there? And I have some small steps which will improve you to get to this vision and how to make most of your identity management. And first step is focus your automation, because as many things as you can automate will eventually help you and free your people to work on more important stuff than to some day-to-day operations. Second important thing is clean your data. And I guess most of the IdM professionals know this phrase, garbage in, garbage out, which is very true in this case. If you want to have automated process, your input data should be really without some exception, everything structured as it's supposed to be, because otherwise you will spend most of your time building some workaround. So it's easier to clean your data before it will get to the identity management. Third step is to have unified identity management and access management for all of your services. And by that, I mean really have central identity management where all of your services are integrated. So you have easy way to configure all your accesses and you know everything is there, no exception. And same thing for the access management. Just deploy single SSO, use it for all of your services, and you make your life easier and life of your users easier as well. And the last step is empower your users, because you don't want your IdM team to deal with requests for enabling access and similar when you can delegate this to the people who actually decide who have access or not. And then your IdM team have time to focus on improvements of the infrastructure of the IdM system itself. They don't have to deal with the support. So these are the steps how to get there. And now I'm moving to the second part of my presentation, when I want to focus on some of these features, like from first and second generation between, and let's go a bit into the detail and also show you how midPoint identity management is dealing with them. First of this principle that I already mentioned is having identity management as a central system. So take all your source systems and get the data to the central place, and same for the target system. So you have identity management really in the middle, having all the data required, and rest is just about the integration, which takes time, but eventually is definitely worth it. In this scenario, you can have identity management as your data source to know what is happening, but also as your execution point. So if you need to provision some accounts, you can do it. And it's easy because everything is in one place. But of course, the reality is not often that clear. So you usually have some other IdM and IdM-related components which you want or need to integrate. And it's really natural, because one IdM, even if it's a really powerful system, usually cannot handle everything and shouldn't. So integration with other components are crucial. And one of the great examples for this is some access management. So if you have some single sign-on solution, it's quite natural you will just hook it to your identity management, but it's good to really have identity management again as a central piece, which is used to feed the identities and attributes to the SSO system. And same is with other system for managing groups and attributes. If you have something like this, you can use it as a source, just another source which you will hook to the IdM, or it can be even target because you already have some other systems and services integrated with this type of system. And nice example of this is LDAP. You usually don't operate LDAP because you need LDAP, but you need LDAP for other services. So the identity management, instead of feeding data directly to the services, can feed it to LDAP, and other services can read it for LDAP. And again, it's completely natural, but still identity management should be the main source of your information and decisions. And what else can happen? You can have some legacy IDM component, which you can, again, hook to the identity management as a source or a target. And eventually, when you migrated everything out of the component, just disconnect it and that's it. And there are some nice tricks you can pull. For example, if you're just switching from one identity management to another, you can use this legacy IDM as a source from the start. And after you will migrate the management and give users access to the new IDM, you can switch the legacy one as a target, use it in this model a while, and then to disconnect it. Yeah, but to have all this info in integration, the crucial thing is provisioning and deprovisioning. And these days, it's still solved using some specific configuration or connectors for each service. Yeah, because we have the problem that there's no standard for it. Yeah. So only thing we can do is to really have specific configuration or connector for each service, and identity management is exactly a component which should help you with that, to maintain these connectors. And you have identity management as a central place with unified view, how to deal with the identity, and the connectors and configuration will just take this unified view from the single interface and transform it based on the end services needs. And when I'm saying there is no widely applicable standard, some people would like to say, but hey, there's SCIM. But yes and no. SCIM is great. It's a great first step, definitely. But the problem is that most of the services, the real services, not just some demo, but real services, need some custom schema or custom interpretation for the attributes. So even if you are using SCIM, you can use as a data transfer format, everything, but still you need specialized configuration per each service to implement the schema that the service needs. Also, talking about provisioning and deprovisioning, I often hear that speed is really crucial. But in reality, I think it isn't, usually, again. Because, for example, if new employee come and the provisioning takes hour or two, usually it's not a problem at all, because before the new employee gets to know the service, colleagues, and prepare his desk, all the accounts are there. And even though the provisioning usually doesn't start with the employee coming to the door, but actually the employee is already in the system, and IDM system is waiting just for the midnight for his first working day, so the IDM can provision the accounts, and it will be there way before the new employee will enter the door. And for deprovisioning, it might seem a bit different, because we want to use deprovisioning to immediately remove access. For example, there is a security incident and we need speed there. But in reality, it's not true often, because even if we remove the accounts, we usually don't reset the service, so the active sessions are still there. So it's not always that easily to implement something like this. But what is often overlooked is full synchronization, because sometimes we have the feeling that if we just send the events like create a new account, remove new account, update account, it will be enough. But the reality is it always gets broken. It's not matter if, only matter is when, because there are some natural stuff that are happening, like restoring services from the backups, which of course immediately break any Delta updates, or administrators can make some manual task and forget to get it back. So any incremental updates is not working in the long time. So from time to time, we always need full synchronization. And also, when talking about provisioning, deprovisioning, I hear messaging. And messaging is great, but in IDM world is often just another complication which you don't need, because you definitely don't need it for speed, and I will get to this later. And otherwise it doesn't bring anything more. It just complicate your options to debug where something gets wrong, because if you have the message and message is missing, or message should trigger some event and then event wasn't triggered, it's very hard to debug in the real life when you have tons of messages and non-stop message flow. So I'm a bit skeptical about that. And how this provisioning and deprovisioning, how is it solved by midPoint? midPoint is using ConID, which is open source identity connector framework, which is used for translating the rules within the midPoint to actually configuration for the service. And great about it is it's bidirectional. So you have one connector and it can be used for incoming data, outgoing data, or even both. You can combine it if you need. And it's using Delta updates. So mostly it's just using these events like create new account, delete that account, update account. And thanks for it, the whole provisioning is really fast, usually in the matter of seconds. And for small and easy operation, not even seconds, it's like instantly done. But the trick is how to combine it in the whole chain. So if we're talking about inbound connection from external system to midPoint, the system have to support some kind of transaction log or something that midPoint, thanks to this connector, will use to generate this Delta update. So just one single operation like create a new account. But if it's there, you can pick up new changes in a seconds, really. And updates from midPoint to the target service are always provisioned immediately, regardless if the update was coming from some source system or if the update is based on some operation that was done manually in the user interface, for example. And having these two combined with these connectors and everything standard, you can have provisioning and deprovisioning within a seconds without any problem. So that's the reason why I'm skeptical about messaging, for example, because even with this simple approach, you can achieve the speed that you want probably. And the next nice feature of midPoint, in combination with ConID, is that you can do full synchronization simultaneously with this live synchronization. So you can process your update on a daily basis, each second, and for example, once a week, you can trigger full synchronization just to make sure that all accounts are there when you expect them to be. Now I will move to some different part of my presentation. I will talk more about how to empower people to do some operations in the identity management. And main thought there, you have two groups of people. You have identity engineers or identity management team, like your internal team who's operated identity management. And then you have some normal users to whom you want to give some access right to manage some roles, group, organization, unit, attributes, whatever you need. And the rule of the thumb here is to give the IdM engineers only the responsibility they need to do. So they should, of course, manage the IdM system itself, but otherwise they should only integrate new services in it. And it's a quite complicated task because they have to think out how to represent the service in the identity management, what are the roles, what attributes you need, how do you map it, and everything like this. But this technical complexity should be completely hidden from the other users. And on the other hand, the other users should do all day-to-day operations like add user into a role or remove him, some approvals or requests, setting expiration or other manual part of your life cycle. Again, if you do this, if you delegate this, your identity professionals can do the important work and can have more time to do it. So how does midPoint support this? And midPoint using something that I like to can use, something that I like to use, smart roles. And it means like archetyping of the users and splitting them into some categories. And I will explain it in a detail a bit later. But for now, for example, you can imagine it like splitting roles into internal and user-facing roles. And the internal roles are managed by the identity engineers and contains all the technical complexity, all the accounts and all the mapping and translation of attributes and whatever you need. But that's hidden from normal users. Normal users see only these user-facing roles, which are nice and they are well described and can be marked somehow. They can have description, clear labels, so the users know what they can do with the role. And even this role can have some like the rules which prevents the users to use the role wrongly. For example, if I have a role for employees, the role itself can contain a policy that cannot be used for users who are not employees. Or I can have a role for organization unit, for example. So the role cannot be assigned to the users, and the midPoint can handle this. And if you manage to have this, the result is quite nice, because then users can manage some exercise on their own, and they don't need this identity professional. They don't need to write an emails or request something. They can do it on their own. That's our goal. Just make some free time for identity professionals. So I was speaking about this archetype, and I will try to get to this more into detail. And the thing is, in the identity management, you have lots of objects, and these objects can represent various things: employees, student, contractors, some organization units, your project, groups, roles, privileges, devices, and I'm sure you can come up with a lot more. And what does the core identity management do? It just organizes all these objects, the attributes and relations between them, and that's core IdM, and then we have a lot of features on top of it. And the question is how to organize this mess. And what midPoint is doing is using archetypes, and you can imagine archetypes as some tool for categorization of objects, some kind of subtype of the object. Because like a philosophy of midPoint is to not restrict individual objects. So you can, for example, you have organization unit there, and it's up to you what you're using for. It will be really your university structure, or if it will be just custom groups, or your project structure, or something completely else. It's up to you. And thanks for it that midPoint is not limiting you how you use the object. You can use this archetype, combine it, and make your settings in a way it works for you and it works for your users. And these archetypes are not just some subtype in some table, but something that actually has some impact. And it can have some own visualization, so you can change colors, change icons, so your users really understand what this archetyped object means. Or this archetype can even carry some limitation and additional policies, but also even some extension, just have something extra. And you can see this on my example down below. I have two archetypes. One is alumni and second one is contractor. And I will just take any user, apply the archetype, and the result is like still user object, but clearly labeled with this archetype, which can bring some changes that I see here, and the icon was changed, but also some limitation policies, extension rules, whatever is needed. And then, so now we have identity management with objects, which are nicely categorized. And then we get to these relations between the objects. And the basic case is really simple. It's intuitive. User has a role, users in a group might have a role. Nice and easy, no problem in that. But it gets complicated very fast, and especially in our higher education environment, where stuff are always a bit more complicated, but we like it, so why not? And the problem is one user can be student or employee of one faculty, or even both at the same time. He can, or he or she can transition from student to employee and even back, for example. Everything is possible. And except of this, the relation can have some even internal usage within the identity management. So you can have like owner of other objects or approvers who are approving some requests. but there's no reason to not use them in the provisioning for external services. You can combine it anyhow. And this is exactly what midPoint is doing. Different types of relations are supported. So you have students, employees within the organization unit easily. And to make it usable, you can configure per types of the object, what relations are supported. So for example, if I have my university and its faculties, for example, that makes sense to have employees and students there. But if I have my project structure, I probably don't want to have employees and students of a project. I just want to have a member. So this can be configured and it can be fine-tuned using these archetypes and combine it all together. And of course, you can use these rules fully in provisioning. So you can create some role or a rule that will say, just take all students from this department and use them for provisioning into this mail system, for example. And as well as internal representation is fully configurable. So you can say, for example, that all the teachers should be able to see a list of their students and use this relation to create some new rules within the IdM even. And it might seem really complex, and it is. And that's why we have IdM professionals, our IdM team, to deal with that. And again, hide this complexity from the users. And from the users, it will be just natural seeing some organization units, students, employees. Should be easy like that. And let's pack it together into this back to the smart roles. And as I said, the complexity should be completely hidden from users. Yeah, all the configuration and all the details are available to the identity management engineer, but not to the users. And midPoint only allows valid operations. For example, if I'm having some role which is meant to be assigned only to group and not the user, midPoint can really execute this policy and don't allow it. And all the roles and objects that are user-facing should be distinguishable, nicely labeled so users can understand. And this was like just a tip of an iceberg, like really deep dive into these roles, relations, and everything. But of course, it can be combined with other features that are available in the identity management, like policies, approval processes, and so much on. But again, this usually is hidden for the users. They don't have to configure some approval process. They just see a request and click approve or not. So this is the example how it can work, so you can imagine it. So I have users and organization unit on the left, and that can be different relations between the user and organization unit, like the employee, student, or external. And then I have the role Office 365 group, which is meant to be assigned to organization unit. And if you do it, just the internal logic will decide what to do with that. So it will provision the group to the Office 365, assign roles for the users, assign licenses. And this is all hidden in the identity management engineer view. Normally users don't have to interact it. They just see this user-facing role, which is already prepared, just use it or not. And the identity engineer can do whatever we want. For example, we have a line from users to this role Office 365 plus AD account. This rule can be used internally if you have some rule, like for example, we want to have some standard license to all of our employees. It can be done by the identity management team. But then which organization unit should be represented as a group can be done by a user. And same thing, some extra licenses like licenses for Power BI. Again, the management of the license can be made available for the users, for someone who's managing licenses, for example, like some manager. But the identity engineer and their team will design this role and, for example, put some policies there so you don't use more licenses that you have bought. And now it's time for some interactive demo using midPoint. So I will just switch my screen to my browser and I will sign in. Sorry, my session was lost, so let me do it again. So now I'm on midPoint as an administrator. And I want to show you this archetype that I was mentioned. And as you see, there is a lot of them because midPoint are using it even for internal stuff. But I want to focus on two archetypes. One is academic user here on top, which is type of my user. So I have academic users and non-academic users here in the end of the screen. And now if I go to my users, and I have just 4 users, you can clearly see the in the middle of the screen that I have different icons. So administrator is special account, so administrator account is red, and then I have academic accounts with this blue cap, and non-academic account with this green person. So if I open Olivia Miller account, you can see the green icon, and on the top right there is the archetype listed, which is non-academic user. And if I open some of the academic user, like Mike Anderson, on the upper right corner, you can see he's academic user. And I will show you the examples of these smart roles. So if I get to the role of this user, I have 2 buttons in the middle of the screen. One with the cap is for assigning roles which are meant for academic user. I have just some dummy role here just to demonstrate it. And the other button is to assign a role for normal users. So we can use some basic user role here. And if I go back to my non-academic user and open the roles again, there is only one button in the middle of the screen, so I can assign only these roles that are meant for all the users. Yeah, so this automatic filtering and offering me only the choices which make sense for the context is there, and it's even there for the administrator, because the administrator shouldn't be an exception and shouldn't use the role where the role is not supposed to be. And if I see which roles I have, you can see there's a lot of them, so the filtration really works. And next step is my organizational structure. And I have organization structure with 2 roots. One is projects, and I have just some examples of project. And second one is structure of the university, when I have the Faculty of Informatics and 2 departments, Applied Cryptography and Department of Computer Science. And if I open the Department of the Computer Science, you can see on lower right corner, I have 3 users here, and Jack Smith is the manager. So what I do now, I will just switch my screen to a different browser, and I will sign as a Mr. Smith, who's the manager, and you can immediately see my user interface is way simpler. I can open the roles now, and you see out of the sudden from this 30 or 40 roles, I have just 2 which are available for him. And if I open organization tree, I have no options to see the projects because I'm not manager of any project. But with this role, I'm manager of Department of Computer Science. And you can even see I don't see the other departments because I'm not allowed to. So I open it and I can see the members here. And what's interesting here, on the really right down corner, you have this relation. So Mike Anderson is, for example, employee and a student at the same time. Scarlett Litch, she's employee, and Jack Smith, the user I'm using right now, is the manager. And if I open one of these users, I'm allowed to see the details, but for example, I can open the role management, but I have no button to manipulate with the roles here. So the only thing, I will get back to the organization again. So what I can do, for example, I can view details of some organization unit, but for I can actually edit it, and I can see what's there. And if I go to the roles management and relations management, I have the option to add a user-facing role for this organization. I can try to add some internal role, but I have no internal role available. But for user-facing roles, I actually have some roles. And you can see selection is here. I can just select and add the role. And that's it. From the user point of view, that's it. And everything else is happening automatically because some IDM professional already did the configuration. So I will get back to my other window when I'm signing as administrator, and I can check if the users actually get this new role, and I can see it's already there. So to get back to my presentation, this was just a smart and short example what you can do with that, and the potential is far greater, and I could show you hours and hours of demonstration how it can be done, but it's still tip of the iceberg. So combine it with all the IDM features, you can have really nice environment which is easy to use, which helps your users to achieve the goal and make it done. What's the next plan? Yeah, we want to go beyond that because we want to introduce some parametric roles and relations. And even what I show you today is far beyond the standard role-based access control. And if we introduce additional parameters, it will give you much more options how to configure it and how to prevent some role explosion, because with this approach, you might get to a situation where you have too many roles and it becomes too hard to manage. And of course, we're planning some user experience improvements just to make it more, because what I show you, it's nice, it works, but it's still not exactly intuitive. So we plan to spend a lot of work on that. And of course, make all the configuration, how to make demos like this easier. So to conclude my talk, the future is not that far as it seems to be. And good thing is IDM systems today offers you more that you are usually using. So it's up to you to think what you need more and how to get there, how to grab this feature and use them. And the whole area of identity management still have a great potential that can be used. So much option to grow, what other use cases to solve, how to help you to manage identities, the relations and everything more efficiently. And my goal and our goal in Evolveum is to push these boundaries, to make even better systems, to understand your problems, your use cases, and come up with solutions, innovative solutions, which will be easier to use, not just for the professional, but also for the end users. And to do that, we are focusing more and more on higher education and research environments, where these interesting use cases are usually starting and then getting adopted by the rest of the world. And we would be really happy to collaborate with you and to hear from you what you need to understand your use cases, so we can help come up with the solution or help you to come up with solution for you. So I would like to encourage you to join the discussion with us. And to do that, you can join our mailing list, for example, which is completely public. You can follow some of our blog series about higher education and identity management in there. For those who are active on Internet to Slack, we have an InCommon and midPoint channel there, so you get in touch in there. And of course, you can reach me in my email. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope we have time for some questions. It's up to you. You can have either, you can synchronize it like from your HR system, for example, and have your organization unit in there, or it can be managed manually, or you can have combination. Because if you notice, I have this one structure with departments and everything, and second structure with project. So let's say the departments can be synchronized and the project can be managed manually. And you can even delegate this, so you can make managers of individual projects and let them create new sub-projects, for example. So even there, you have a way how to delegate this and give this option to other people. This is the limitation of the database connector, because the database connector is working with only one table, but there are other connectors for database that you can use, and they can work with multiple tables. And for example, one of them is scripting connector, where you can do everything. Or the second option, if you like the database connector, which is quite simple and easy to configure, you can create one view which will combine multiple of your data and then use it for the database connector and just create mappings that will extract the information to user attributes or to organization structure, depending on your needs. I showed a picture of identity management being center of everything. And to be able to do this, you have to be able to define any mappings that you need. So if you have multiple identifiers in multiple systems, you can have a schema extension for midPoint and have all these identifiers stored within the user. And for example, you can even have some transition between them if you are able. So let's say if some of the identifiers are prefixed or suffixed with something, you can easily create a mapping that will just compare them and use them. And also you have options to create some correlation just to explain which users are the same. So they might have different identifier, but maybe you have some other means how to identify that it's the same person. For example, corporate email, and you have certainty that's the same user based on the email. So midPoint can have different identifiers in different systems, but for example, have correlation rule, which tells you it's the same user because it has the same email. And it's really a matter of the configuration, and it might seem complex, but at the end of the day, it isn't. As you say, you have some legacy stuff, you know how it works, how you know how you want to manage it. So have just put it in the rules. And nice about midPoint is this configurability. So it doesn't tell you which identifiers you should use. It just say you tell me which identifier are you using and what are their relations.